Good morning. Wow, is it good to see everybody here this morning. My name is Reverend Michael Roque, and it is my honor, and I am humbled to be up here once again and to have conversations, to do this crazy dance of our own spirituality, of our own divinity. Because at Unity, we believe that each and every one of us have the spark of the divine within us. And when we start to pay attention to that spark, when we start to listen, when we actually give ourselves permission to slow down, by the way, that's what you need to do to hear. You got to slow down. But when you slow down and start paying attention to what your soul is calling you to, and by the way, that's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But that spark, that voice will lead you home. It will lead you to where you meet, finally, the divine. And you get to connect with yourself, and then ultimately you get to connect with the divine. And the other cool part about that is we get to do it with each other. And then, once you start to engage in that process, life just gets to be fun. And it doesn't mean that all of our problems go away overnight. That's not what happens. It just means the way that you're going to handle them is going to be way different. Because guess what? Now we've got an army standing behind us. We've got the ability to tap into our divinity and use all these spiritual tools, because really when you look at Unity, when you really break it down, it's really a practice. It's really about your spiritual practice. It's about learning some spiritual tools, prayer, meditation, and a whole bunch more, right? And then we take those spiritual tools and we apply them in our life. And then all of a sudden, life starts to kind of happen. And then we come up with this idea, wow, instead of being a victim, when we stand over here, and I've spent a lot of my life being a victim, but then all of a sudden we go, wait a minute, I'm a child of God, and I've got my, this pretty amazing thing behind me called my divinity, and I can tap into that thing, and all of a sudden I come over here, guess what? Now I become a powerful creator. And now all of a sudden, instead of being a victim of life, I can actually look at it and go, well, you know what? I really like this part of my life, and I like this part of my life, but I think I want to work on this one. And then guess what? Then you get to all of a sudden call this thing into your life and you say, hey, God, you know what? I'm looking at this part of my life right now. I'd like to work on that a little bit. God says, great, I got all these incredible tools for you to use, where you can start to create and manifest what it is that you want in your life. We believe you have the power to do that. We do. But it takes work and it takes effort. And when you do that work and the effort with other people, like you're looking at right here, and you grab God as your partner, life becomes this amazing dance. Because then all of a sudden, you get to experience what it's like to hang out with God. And for me, there's no greater dance or party in town. It's incredible when you can do that. It's everything that you thought when you were really, really little, and you were thinking about God, and it was like, oh my God, this heart-warming feeling, this thing that's going on inside of me that I thought could really exist. And then all of a sudden, you went out into life, and you kind of got beat up, right? And it's like, where did God go? And it's like, God never left. God's still there, because God's always there. And it's like when all of a sudden you understand that and you start going into your head and getting rid of all this garbage that's been put in there, and then all of a sudden you start applying some of this stuff, to me, it doesn't get any better than that. Any better than that. So, sorry, but I get excited, but not really, because I think that's why you're here. So we're just super excited to have you here this morning. We hope you sit back, relax, enjoy, and receive. That's one of the great lessons. Just receive this morning. Just receive, because there's a lot going on in this room right here, right now. So if there's something that you need, ask and receive. Today we are continuing this journey that we've been on this year around this idea into this deep study and understanding of a practice that actually goes through many different traditions. It's called the medicine wheel. And in that tradition, for those of you that have been following this and for those that are new, I'd like to do just a little bit of a recap in that in the medicine wheel, there's 4 directions, north, east, west, and south. And in each one of those directions, it represents a part of us, an aspect of us. So we're not one-dimensional, we're multidimensional, right? And so when you look at the directions, the east represent the spiritual aspect of us, the south is the physical aspect of us, the west is the emotional aspect of us, and the north is the mental aspect of us. And the thing that is so fascinating about that when you start to really look at this is that you understand that the purpose or the goal of these traditions, which came all over the world, and I think that's one of the things that fascinated me, was the medicine wheel wasn't just found in one place on the planet. Actually, it was found all over the world from all these indigenous tribes. And the thing that's fascinating about it is just to see how close they were. They're a little bit different, right? So there's not one size fits all. There were some differences. But all of them had the same theory when it came to the medicine wheel, and that came down to this idea of balance. Because in the medicine wheel tradition, regardless of which tradition it was, most of us are generally strong in particular areas of our life, and in other areas, maybe not so much. Right? And it creates it when that happens, and there's one part of us, let's say, for example, mentally, you're really strong mentally, then that's great. But then all of a sudden, if you're not connected emotionally, guys, raise your hand, that can cause some problems in your life. And I can attest, being a guy, that has been something that I had struggled with greatly in the past. And then I realized, so in other words, what happens in that tradition was that I realized I was not balanced in the emotional side of my life. And then so, guess what? I had some work to do, right? So that's the tradition. And so when I came across this and I decided to study it this year, is we're going through each one of the seasons live. So a couple of weeks ago, we did the spring. And in the spring is the spiritual. And we talked about this idea of what happens in the spring is creation, right? And we talked about, I used this analogy of a farmer. And the farmer in the spring, what does the farmer do? The farmer basically starts off and they prep the soil. Metaphysically, prepping the soil means what? Our mind. We got to make sure our mind is good. We got to make sure we got a strong mind, that we don't got a bunch of junk up here. So we prep the soil means what? We're starting to pay attention to what's going on between these two things, your ears up here. What are we telling ourselves? What are our beliefs? What are our thoughts? What are we doing with those things, right? And then once you prep the soil, then the farmer does what? He figures out, what am I going to plant here? Seeds metaphysically represent your thoughts, and we believe that those matter. Unity believes that our thoughts matter a lot, right? And so the idea here is, figure out what seeds you're going to plant. And then what do? We plant the seeds. So the way that we do that metaphysically is we start to think very specific thoughts for things that we want to achieve in our life, or things that we want to see manifest in our life. And so today and next week, we're going to be discussing the summer. And the summer, again, is about the physical reality. That's physical, right? From a metaphysical perspective, it makes total sense because the summer, by then, what are we seeing is happening in the fields right now for people that are anywhere near farms? What's happening? Knee-high by 4th of July. Don't you see the corn coming up? You see, if you're around farms, you see this stuff going on all the time right now. Because what happened? Well, we planted the seeds, we watered the seeds, we've done everything we needed to do, and now it's showing up. It's physical. And so the summer is very physical. And we can see these plants. What are plants? What do they represent metaphysically? What they represent metaphysically is the manifestation of the seed. Now, I know this sounds kind of basic, but sometimes it's like, oh yeah, what's going on here? Why is this showing up in my life? Why is this happening? More than likely, it's because there were some seeds that were planted way back when, and they're starting to manifest now. And that can be a really cool thing if you're doing it intentionally, if you're doing it consciously, because then you get to create the reality of the way that you want to create it, but it sucks if you're doing it unconsciously. I spent a lot of my life doing it unconsciously. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, geez, after you've been around Unity for 40 years, this stuff kind of sinks in, right? And so you start doing it that way, which can be really fun. Now, the summer is also about what? Heat. It's hot. There's a ton of energy. It's in the cycle of life, it's the peak of the life cycle. That's what's happening. It's about expansion. It's about growth. It's about maturity. It's about moving into this thing. And that's what the summer is. It's a very, very physical thing. And when you think about it, going back to use the analogy of the farmer, what is the farmer actually doing during the summer? And the farmer, it really comes down to their nurturing and their caring for, and they're protecting the plants, aren't they? They want to make sure that these plants are okay. I mean, think about it from this standpoint. They're like their little babies, right? And they want to make sure, hey, is everything okay? So they're going around and they're fertilizing them and they're making sure these things are getting water and they're protecting them. They're making sure no critters or no bugs get into it to eat the plants while they're trying to grow them, right? And so, in a sense, they're really protective. Really protective. You parents out there, I know you get this because I don't know about you, but when my kids were in my house, there's this freaking radar thing that's going on all the time. And I don't care if they're sitting right there or they're 10 feet from me, my radar was on constantly. And that's kind of what the deal is with the farmers and the plants. So question. Think about this for a minute. You just spent all this time. You did all the soil thing, you did all the seed thing, you planted them, you watered them, you're taking care of them. What would happen if we just stopped doing all of that? What would happen? Shrivel up and die? Maybe. Yeah, could. Yep. Yeah, probably. It would what? The deer would eat the crops, so the critters would come in and start mowing on them? Yep. Anything else? Did you say lack of prosperity? You wouldn't have the crops. You wouldn't get what you were wanting, right? Summer, especially metaphysically, is such an important time because it's when these things are manifesting in your life, and now is the time not to take your foot off the gas pedal. Do not take your foot off the gas pedal. Do not quit caring for your goals, your dreams, the things that you are working on. Because if you do, then critters will come and all kinds of things will happen if you take your foot off the gas pedal. Don't do that. Don't do that. So then the question is, well, okay, Mike, I kind of get it. We come up with these ideas that we want to manifest in our life, and then we start working on these things and making sure that we're paying attention. But what does that look like, this idea of nurturing? What does this look like metaphysically speaking when it comes to what you want to create in your life? What does it look like? So this morning, I just want to touch base on a couple of ways, a couple of tools, if you will, that you can use that could be very, very helpful. Now, I've kind of already mentioned one of them, and certainly for all you long-term Unity people, this will not come as a shock or a surprise. But what do you think the number one thing is when it comes to our creation and what we're doing? What do you think the one thing is that you really, really, really need to be paying attention to? What's that? Apathy? Good one, but not the one I was thinking of. Anybody else? Communication? Not bad. These are good. Yeah. Bingo. thoughts. Your thoughts. So let's talk about that for just a minute. Your thoughts. Unity, as well as many other famous people that are into personal growth and development, all believe that our thoughts create our reality, right? So I'm not saying anything here that's earth-shattering. They believe that, right? In fact, if you're a unity person, you know that's one of our 5 core principles, which is thoughts are things, the law of mind action. Thoughts held in mind create after their kind, right? So it's one of our core principles. And we believe that as one of the things that you may want to consider doing is start paying attention to what you're thinking. My own belief is that we're energy. And we create. We're powerful creators because of who and what we are. And our thoughts create within us energy. And because we are energy, guess what happens? We attract energy. And so we're sitting around giving off a bunch of stuff, good stuff, or very specific things, things you want to create, love, harmony, compassion, all those things, you'll attract them. And people and situation and circumstances start showing up. Kind of like in my life, you. That's kind of how I did this, by the way. By the way, it wasn't just me, it was God. God and I co-creating this whole experience, right? But don't think that this happened by mistake. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, right? So bottom line, we believe it's really important that you pay attention to what you're thinking because most people don't. Most people live their life very unconsciously. Wake up, doon, 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 doon. There's the alarm clock, doon, 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 doon. Go to work, doon, 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 doon. Come home, have dinner. Do that 40 years. Then I retire and die. Right? Which is fine. And I got to say this. It's really clear there is no judgment. I'm not better than or less than anybody else. Right? Goodness knows I get stuck occasionally. We all do. But the point is that you really, really can go out there and do something about it. In this context, our thoughts are considered to be what you may have heard called the first principle. Has anybody heard of that concept or idea, first principle? For those of you not familiar with it, it's basically starts from the Greek philosopher Aristotle. And he said, it's the first basis from which a thing is known. It's where everything started. And we believe the first basis from which everything is known are your thoughts. When you start to wrap your mind around this concept or idea, that you can actually do something to change your reality, that's a game changer for a lot of people. It's been for me, and it's been for a lot of people that have come into these doors and started studying the principles that we were taught by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. But if you really want to understand why things are going on in your life that you can't kind of wrap your mind around, my suggestion is go back to the first principle. Sit down. You can literally do this. We're going to do this in a minute. And ask yourself, well, what am I thinking about this particular situation? What do I really think about it? Is it horrible? Is it terrible? Is it good? Am I sending good energy to it? Because for everything that's going on in your life right now, you have a relationship with it. Whether you know it or not, you are in relationship with whatever it is. My question is, what are you doing with that relationship? What kind of energy are you sending that relationship? What kind of thoughts or ideas are you sending that relationship with whatever it is that's going on in your life, good and bad, right? Take a look at it. Go back to the first principle. What is it that's causing all this stuff? What is it? And I would strongly suggest start with your thoughts and see what is there. Because when you stop and think about that and try to come up with, well, what am I thinking about this? You'll get a pretty good picture. And by the way, if you want any help, call me, and we'll go through it together, right? But you'll get a really good, clear picture on why things are showing up the way that they are. And the other thing I'm going to suggest when you do this, remember, we don't do shame, blame, guilt, or judgment. We don't do that here. Those are not tools for transformation, we believe. When you can look at yourself honestly, when you can really honestly look at your thinking without shame, blame, guilt, or judgment, and you can just look and go, oh, I get it. This is what I've been doing. Then all of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute. If thoughts create my reality and those thoughts created this part of my reality, then I can do something about that. That is when things get really powerful. Yes, you can do something about that. Because you can start to make some adjustments. In Unity, we call it using affirmations about creating your new reality. And that's what metaphysics is truthfully all about. You consciously create your own reality, starting with your thoughts. And you may say, well, Mike, how important is it to really understand this first principle concept? I don't know. Did you ever hear of somebody named Elon Musk by chance? Who hasn't heard of Elon Musk, right? What Elon Musk says about first principle is boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then say, okay, what are we sure is true or are sure as possible is true? And then we reason up from there. So whenever he considers doing something, he starts with first principle. He goes back to when the thing originally started, and he thinks, what was going on at the time when they started this whole thing? What was the thinking behind it? And he tries to figure out, okay, this is what was going on at the time. These are the thoughts that were available at the time. But then he kind of says, well, wait a minute. What about now? What's changed? Technology, thoughts, understanding, wisdom, anything. What has changed and what can I do to move it forward? He wants to get inside of people's heads to understand what they were thinking at the time something that was created. That's what he does. And he won't move forward until he finally and fully understands the first principle. And then once he does that, then he can see where the mistakes were made. Then he can see what's available now and make the improvements. And it allows him to do this at lightning speed. Lightning speed. When you look at what he's done, it's sometimes mind-blowing to me to think about this. Out of college, he started this little company called PayPal. Anybody ever hear of that? Yeah. When he sold it, he was in his early 20s. His part, because he did it with a team of guys, $178 million. And then guess what he does? Oh, he goes on to start this little thing called Tesla Motors and starts building electronic cars. And now, I mean, my God, he does so much stuff I can't keep track anymore. I have no idea. Yeah, I wrote a check for $44 billion to buy Twitter. Who does that? That's the genius of going back to first principle. And for us, people, first principle comes back to our thoughts. And so, how do we start caring for our garden? It starts with our thoughts, but we're not done. Thoughts are the first thing. The second thing I want to talk about, what is coming out of your mouth? What are you saying? Your words are powerful. They make a difference. You ever notice that when someone's having a down day and you go talk to them for a little bit or give them a hug or something? Do you ever notice how it changes things? On the same end, you ever been on the other end of it where somebody's yelling and screaming at you? How's that make you feel? Words are powerful. They make a difference. Charles Fillmore said the following about words. They are the living things that may be used either constructively or destructively. Either way, the right use of words is one of the most important factors in successful living. I'm going to say that again. Coming out of Charles Fillmore, one of the founders of Unity, says, The right use of words is one of the most important factors in successful living. You might want to pay attention to what's coming out of this. Right? These are words, and this wisdom even that Fillmore was talking about is not, these words aren't merely a collection of sounds, but they are actually living. When you start to understand that this is energy, you're putting it out there, and it affects not only our inner world, but our outer world, your life will start to change if you really want to start to pay attention to make a difference in your life. And Fillmore knew that. He knew that we spoke positively about something and affirmatively, that we align ourselves with the divine flow. And that allows blessings and opportunities to manifest in our lives. So your words matter. Be careful with what you're saying. That is what affirmations are all about. Think about it. You're consciously choosing the words that you want to use, the most powerful and effective words that you can use to create whatever it is that you want in your life. That's the purpose of what affirmations do. That's it. So we've talked about thoughts. We've talked about words. There's one last piece in this process of manifesting, and that is action. Action. You've got these great thoughts you're working on. Man, the thoughts are great. My thoughts are rock solid. They're working awesome. I've got these words. I'm using all these affirmations, and you are off to a fantastic start. But guess what? You don't take action, you get zero. Action is important. And those actions have to be in alignment with what it is that you're trying to manifest. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I don't care how pure your thoughts are. I don't care how good your words are. If you are not taking action, nothing is going to happen. And I know you got to be sitting there looking at me like going, yeah, Mike, no kidding. Do you know how many people I coach that have brilliant ideas, and will sit there and talk about them until they are blue in the face, and yet, when it's time to actually start taking action towards those goals, guess what happens? It's like I'm watching them, and all of a sudden they go, and that's as far as they go. They don't go any further. Normally, it's because of fear or something else, but they put all this work into it and they don't take any steps further. They don't. And so it's, again, this idea that we have to take actions. And that's why in those cases what I'll often do is I'll just start off with somebody and say, take baby steps. Do me a favor. Like, take this one little step towards something that you're working towards, no matter how small it is. And then once you're done with that one step, which is all I want them to do, I'll say, take another one. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create some momentum, because what I know about momentum is once you get the ball rolling down the hill, it just kind of seems to go. How many people have tried to change something in their life where it just took getting the ball going just a little bit, and the next thing you know, then all of a sudden you're doing whatever it is you need to do, whether it's writing a book, whether it's exercising, whether it's eating right, whether it's coming to eat, whatever, right? You just start baby steps. That's it. We don't have to look at something at the mountain and go, well, how am I going to get up there? You just take the first little step, and sometimes that's all that's necessary to get the thing going. But you have to take it, right? You have to take the first step. So, the summer. We've done all the work. The plants are starting to come up. And now we're starting to pay attention to our thoughts, our words, and our actions to make sure all three of those things are in alignment with what we're trying to create in our life. So what I'd like to do for a moment is take you into a little meditation. Now, here's what we can do with this. You can either take something that you're working on and check in on those things. Or maybe there's something in your life that you're kind of struggling with a little bit. And again, when we go through this exercise, there is no shame, there is no blame, there is no guilt, there is no judgment. We're just going to be honest with ourselves about these things. So, if you will join me for this moment, and just get comfortable in your chair. Take a deep breath in, let it out. One more deep breath in, let it out. And then one more deep breath in and let it out. And what I'd like you to do is to bring into your awareness either something that you're currently working on, consciously trying to create in your life, or maybe something that you might be struggling with. Either one. And then again, as we do this exercise, there's no shame, blame, guilt, or judgment here. We're just trying to understand. We're trying to get to the first principle. And with this thing in your mind, I want you to think about your thoughts about this particular thing. What are you thinking about this thing? And just process that for a little bit. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it right? Is it wrong? Are you doing everything that you wanted to do? Is this thing not working in your life anymore? Whatever the thoughts are, just let them go. Just observe, observe, observe. And then I just want you to think for a minute, what are the words that you're saying about this particular thing? In other words, when you're talking to your friends or your family and this subject comes up, what does it sound like? And then lastly, I just want you to think about, what do the actions look like about this particular thing? And then when you're ready, you can slowly start to open your eyes and come back into the room. And welcome back. Anybody notice anything about your thoughts, your words, or your actions that they would care to share? Anybody? Any thoughts or ideas? Charles? Calm and peaceful. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Did anybody notice anything that could possibly be out of alignment? I hear some gigglings, more than one. Yeah. This exercise can be extremely powerful. I want you to imagine, in terms of first principle, the following. What do you think your thoughts would sound like if this thing that was going on in your life was going the way that you wanted it to go? What would your words sound like if this thing in your life was going the way that you wanted it to go? What would your actions look like? Because what we want to do is we want to see, are those three things in alignment with what I'm trying to produce? And if they're not, from a very loving, compassionate standpoint, maybe there's some work to do. And I know how much you love to do work. But that's what this is, folks. I always say this. It's like, great. We found the love. We've got connected. We're doing all this stuff. Yeah, it's true, but it's work. The stuff is work, right? Because that's your part. We're not just robots down here. We're actually living human beings that are trying to figure this thing out called life, right? And when you start to use these things, all of a sudden what I have found is I discover, and I do it all the time, by the way, I'm not immune from doing this stuff. Is there's times when I'm thinking like, oh, this is what I want. And when I look at my thoughts, my words, and my actions, I'm like, who are you and what are you doing? It's just a complete misalignment. And that's okay. That's where you slow down, you give yourself a hug, and then you think about a reset, and then you just sit down and spend some time with it. What am I thinking? What are the thoughts I want to change? What are the different words that I want to say? What are the different actions that I want to take? When you start doing that in connection with the big girl or the big guy, whatever you choose to call God, you guys know I have fun with that word, whatever it is, then life becomes this amazing dance. And it can become really powerful and can become really, really fun. And so, my challenge to you, should you choose to accept it, is to start looking at those things and start playing with them. And if you've got any questions or you have any thoughts or you feel like you're stuck, which is a very common thing that I hear with a lot of different people, then get a hold of me and we can sit down and have a conversation about that. Next week, for the second part of this, just like I did in the first practice of the spring, we're going to be talking about the 12 powers and how the 12 powers, you can use the 12 powers to assist you in this process as well. Having said that, you are all amazing. You are all beautiful beyond anything that you could even imagine. You are so important. You are so needed. You are so valuable. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you've joined us this morning. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here this morning. It's been really, really fun. I hope you walk away with something, even if it's, this guy's crazy. That's okay. I've heard worse. But I really hope you have a beautiful day. God bless you, and thank you so much for being here this morning.